Hello, hello, and welcome to First Draft Friday. This is episode number 76. I am so excited. I'm your host, Alessandra Torre with Authors AI, and I am joined today by the lovely Audrey Harrison, who is a best-selling historical romance author. And we are going to be talking about how you can, first of all, perform historical research on your books, and then how to implement that in the story. So welcome, Audrey. We're so excited to have you here. Do you want to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
I'm Audrey Harrison. I'm from the UK. I live in a town in the northwest of England, halfway between Manchester and Liverpool. And my background was public sector, but in 2011, I published my first independent published novel even, and they say the rest is history. And nearly 40 historical romances later, I'm still loving it. Still get a real buzz every time a book is published, and just grateful that readers seem to enjoy my stories.
I love that. I was going to ask how many you've written, and there is a little bit of an echo, maybe. Never mind, it went away. I was going to ask how many you've written, and when you wrote your first book, did you know from the beginning that you wanted to write historical romance? And if so, what led you to the time frame of historical romance that you picked?
I wanted to write. I've always been interested in history from being a tiny tot, and I've always wanted to write historical romance. But I actually submitted initially to an editor, and she came back and went, "No, there's no market. It's not a story that could be published." Blah blah blah. So I published my first two novels weren't historical; they were more modern. And then I sold a few, and it wasn't very much. And I don't think my heart was in it as much as anything. And then in the background, this little novel which I'd written was niggling away. And I thought, oh, well, just put it out there and see what. And it literally took off. It was just unbelievable. It was number 2 in the US. It was number 1 in the UK. And I'm sat there going, they're going to come knocking on my door and say, we've got the figures wrong. It was just... It was unbelievable, and it just proved to me that sometimes the gatekeepers in the publishing world haven't always got it right. No.
Yes. I just wanted to double check that you don't have another window open with YouTube or Facebook. You don't have anything. You don't have our chat playing on another window, do you? I don't hear you talking. You know what? It only does it when I start talking. I think we're good. I think it's just a microphone.
I was going to say no.
Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. So, and I love that story, and I love that because a lot of times if the first novel is a breakaway hit, we don't really appreciate it as much as if we have some novels that, but it also kind of underlines that this is where you belong, and this is, and this is your niche. I asked you part of this, but you said you write Regency.
Yes.
And what is forgive me for not knowing, but what time frame specifically is Regency historical romance?
It can vary. Different historians say different. I mean, purely Regency is 1810 to 1820, but basically you're okay, sort of 1800 to the 1827. But mine do tend to be in the 1810 to 1820 period, because I love the fashion, and I love the society at that time, what was big and what wasn't big. So I just write about what I love, really.
And did you read in that genre a lot before you started writing in it?
Yes. My first job was working in a library after I left school. And unfortunately for the library, you could take out as many books as you wanted as a worker. And so I did. And I mean, I've always read, but working in the library was just fantastic for me. And there I discovered Georgette Heyer, first of all. And fell in love completely. Fell in love. That was it. Then the switch had been flipped.
So being a reader in that genre, it probably helped in terms of you already knew kind of like what clothing was referred to as, you already understood communications in that time frame, you know, transportation. I mean, I would think just consistently reading in a certain genre is an education in itself, even if it's not nonfiction, even if it is fiction. Did you already kind of come into, you know, writing historical Regency with a pretty good background?
Quite a good background, because as well as obsessively reading books, I obsessively buy books as well. As my family grown every time we walk past the bookshop, and it's like, no, Mum, come out, you know. And but I've got about 400-ish books that I can tap into research. And that's a lot of that diaries that have been produced of people from the era, or just slightly before or slightly afterwards. Because again, you just get a feel of society. I mean, I've got one which is the diary of a governess, and it's hilarious because it's so boring, but it's her life. It's you know, and every day she says about the children being well. But of course, that was important to her. You know, it's sort of.
I mean, children die.
Yes. Yeah. But it's sort of when you're on the 150th page, you go, well, I don't care if they're well. Give me some, like, you know, give me some gossip. What's happening? So,
Give me some.
Yeah. So it can. But I mean, even about the food and one particular thing, I'll have to show it because I love this book. This is it's the A to Z. You probably can't see it. Of Regency London, but it's basically a street map of the buildings and the streets, and I just absolutely love that because I can plot where my families are going to live, and you know, for me, I'm a complete pantster where it comes to writing stories. I don't plan. I'll get an idea about something and then just run with it. But with research, I'm just down 100 rabbit holes and just having a whale of a time. And then one line will get added into the book of 3 hours of research. You know, it's sort of, but that one line just helps to make the story real.
Do you think as an author you need to love research if you're going to write historical? I mean, do you think that needs to be kind of a good fit?
I think so, yeah. I would certainly say so in my case, because because you spend so many hours researching it, even to the point of you'll type a word and then you'll think, when was that word first used? And the amount of words that you will go and search, and it'll say like first used 1863 in America, and you go, I can't use it. So, you know, it's sort of so I think if you've not got the patience and commitment to sort of make sure everything's correct as much as you can. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch. That I'll leave to Georgette Heyer, because she had absolutely a library full of research. But I think you need to enjoy it, and it is the bit that I get the buzz out of as well. It is good fun.
That makes perfect sense, and I think probably that's why I, as an author, have avoided writing historical. I mean, because I hate history. That sounds so bad, but I mean, I know me, and I know that for me, it would be overwhelming. I think the learning curve. So I think it does help if you know, we want to do what we love, and that would be really hard for me. But it was interesting because when you were talking about the governess, or you know, and diary and her thinking, it's not just when you're researching a time period, understanding the clothes and the technology and the, you know, different classes, but also just the mindset of people. And if a man approached a woman in a certain way, how she would react and how she would think about that. And things that we do without thought nowadays might be a grievous error. in that time frame, and vice versa. So how do you kind of get into the head of characters who lived back then? And do you have any tips for fellow authors in kind of really understanding the mindset of characters and how they would react and think about certain things?
I think again it goes back to reading diaries and the like. And what I found, my books are pretty clean, so there's not a lot of spice in them. Mainly because when I started writing, I knew my nieces were going to be reading them, and they were only early teens, and I couldn't I couldn't make them more spicy. The diaries that are out there actually shocked me when I first started researching and reading them, because they're a lot more spicy than we would give them credit for. We think back, and it's the Victorians that put all the morals on everybody and closed everything down, but the Georgians were just rampant. But again, there is within the sort of the perfect society that was very restricted, but you don't have to scratch very far under the surface to find a lot of debauchery and all sorts of stuff. So it's interesting. It's getting a balance of keeping a fictional world, but also hinting at a sort of the real world, if you like. So I mean, that's what you get bad guys for, isn't it? It's that they can be the real side of history. But yeah, it's funny, but it's interesting what you said about the having a steep learning curve if you went back to write history, because a couple of years ago I did a trilogy actually based on real stories from my husband's ancestors. Fascinating stories, and for years I'd resisted writing them, and one of the reasons was they were Victorian and sort of 1846, and I wasn't sure. I wasn't as confident in writing, the clothing, the sort of again the restrictions, because in 20 odd years things change. When we look back 20 odd years, it's massive difference. And so that took me a long time, even though you would think, oh, a historical novelist is fine. But yeah, just swapping. So I've said I'm not doing any more Victorian.
I would have thought the same thing. I would have thought, oh, like that shows, I think, also the ignorance, where I'd be like, oh, what's 20 years? When we're talking about going back 200 years. But it does, I mean, like you said, especially, I mean, when you look in the 80s versus the 2000s, it is very, very different. But also it's also, I guess, like historical events that happened during then. And
yeah.
Depending on your location, whether or not that area was engaged in a war or, something else. Are all of your books in the same like area or town?
No, I do have a bit of an obsession with Bath. And if I could afford it, I would live in Bath. But it's in the south of England, and the difference between the north and the south is huge. But so quite a few of my stories either take place there or part of it takes place there. But there's been London, because obviously London was the centre of the universe where society was concerned. But also I have taken stories abroad. One was in Portugal, and sort of linked in with the Peninsular Wars that were going on around that time. And I really enjoyed writing about that again, because it's a whole new aspect of it for me and the reader. And I spent 2 weeks traveling around Spain and Portugal, and it was great. It was absolutely great to see all the battle sites and everything. It was, and again, only a fraction of that goes into the book, but there's no saying that in the future it wouldn't appear again in a different story.
Yeah, like when you had said earlier 3 hours for one line, but it was like, yeah, but maybe that brought ideas, and do you get ideas as you do research? Does it spurn different ideas of scenes or of plot lines?
Yes, yeah. There is usually something that triggers. I mean, one time, again, a few years ago, we went to the Foundling Hospital in London, and when I was going in, it was just curiosity. You know, I know it had started in the Regency times, and in the Georgian times, and was going during the Regency. And as I was walking around, it was, this has to appear in a story. I have to do a story around this, and I actually did two. It was two follow it on from each other. So it was just that going round and reading about it, and it was like, this has to appear in a book. I have to tell this story. So yeah, and it can just be a little flicker. As my husband, long suffering, always says when we go visiting everybody anywhere, what section of the Regency has this got to do with it? You know, and it's sort of, and I go, nothing, and he goes, I don't believe you.
There's no way you're just innocently picking this location or
No.
this stuff. Do you find, do you find that there are more opportunities in that time frame for stories versus a modern? For example, it seems like back then, and I write mostly suspense now, so I'm always thinking about murders and that sort of thing. But I'm always like, oh man, it would have been so easy to kill somebody and get away with it, like in the 1800s. And I don't like. I'm curious if you find yourself hitting like certain roadblocks from that time period, or does it typically almost help you out in creating misconnections or, you know, miscommunications that could cause conflicts? Is it on your side, or is it often the opposite?
It's often the opposite, because if you get illnesses, of course, in the story, very often you want them to recover, but in real life they would have died. Because
so it has to be a small illness.
Yes. Yeah, I know. So again, you've done research, and I know one day again, husband was looking over my shoulder, and he was like, "What are you looking at that for?" And it was sort of head injuries that won't kill you. You know, I think he thought I was going to do him in or something. And again, one of my books that I've got is the A to Z of poisons, and so again, you've got to look really closely, I mean, it's fascinating. I could become a herbalist if the book stops selling. I could become a herbalist with everything that's known. But again, it's so fascinating, even though it's not necessarily specific to the genre. You know, it's a lot wider, but you need to know what they were doing at that time. It's I mean, even to the point of one involved a shipwreck and on an island, and I had to find out what animal could bite that they wouldn't necessarily notice, but could cause a major illness. You know, and so it's hilarious. It's great fun.
I love it. Oh my gosh. And like you said, illnesses I wouldn't even think about. And childbirth, I would think, was also a really dangerous thing.
Very dangerous. And in fact, one of the diaries that I have read, a woman was a captain's wife, and she gave birth to a stillborn in the morning and then had a dinner party in the evening. And you just think that is beyond any comprehension of how we would be, even after childbirth. But the fact that she's not grieving for the child, it's all.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's just, and you think
it was a hard life, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. It was very much. You were very fortunate if you had a large family and they all survived. Basically, so it was more the normal for it not to survive. You hear of women losing quite a few. And you just think, and they just got on with it. The mind boggles what they must have gone through. But yeah, again, it's another rabbit hole.
We have two great questions. I'll show this one first from Diane. She wanted to know, do you publish traditionally or have you self-published at any point? I know the answer to this, but
yeah, I've self-published all but 3 of my novels. I did Regency murder mysteries, 3 Regency murder mysteries with Dragon Blade Publishing last year. Yeah, last year. But so far, and I'm still self-publishing.
Okay, so this is interesting. So you started in self-publishing and you wrote 30 and self-published, I'd guess 30 books, something like that. And then you decided to switch horses both with publishing and also with your genre. And you wrote Regency mysteries?
Yes. They gave me the freedom to pick which it was going to be Regency. It was sort of, we both agreed on that, but they gave me the freedom to pick which sort of subgenre of that. And I quite fancy, I love cozy mystery. I absolutely love cozy mystery. So for me, it was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good fun, actually, interweaving the mystery. Not brilliant when you're a pantster, because you really do need to write down, because I'm saying that in hindsight, because I really didn't.
I love that. Another question, this one from Linda, and this is a great question. On Facebook, she said, how do you research for dialogue?
There's a few resources out there. I mean, one for that, Georgette Heyer is brilliant. But there's also a few books. I've got one here. It's called Cant, A Gentleman's Guide. And that has all sort of lots of words. And I've also got a huge book which has sailing terms and words. So it's sort of Google is okay up to a point, but I do think having a few books that back up that you can rely on a bit more is really good. And again, if you get the diaries, you can see because most of the diaries, even if they're transcribed as they were written, so it's quite good. And punctuation is even worse than mine, which is saying something. I love my editor.
Do you think it helps a lot that you are English? I mean, if it was an author like me who was trying to write, Regency in that area, and I'm also trying to kind of navigate the subtleties of, British English versus American English, you already sound to me very dignified, and like I could just transport you into the 1800s and change a couple words and it would be good. But so do you think that helps? I mean, you're already naturally.
I think it helps for as a reader, it can jolt me out of the story, because you have blocks and sidewalks. Well, we don't. It's just we have pavements. And so things like that. And I always think it's quite sad that happens. But I mean, spelling. I obviously write in English, British English, and again, my readers know that. But I think the spelling isn't as important as the phrases, because that, particularly sidewalk and pavement, you would never have got a sidewalk. It's and gotten. That is another thing. We don't use gotten. We use got. Please use got.
Yeah, that's the important to beta readers, I guess, or an editor, having an editor who is, from that area. Okay, we only have 5 minutes left and we have a few more questions. So Phoebe says that her question for you is, what is your daily writing schedule and how do you keep going at times when you might feel low in confidence or inspiration? So before you answer this, can you let us know how many books a year you write? Because I believe you're very prolific. At least it feels like you are.
Okay. Last year, I think I wrote 6. This year, I've decided I'm not writing as many as that because I didn't do anything else other than write. But in the morning, I try and do admin, get that out of the way. So it's answering emails, doing a bit of social media, and then sort of just before lunchtime, I will go back over the last chapter that I've written and change that, or because of, when you wrote it, you do usually need to tweak it, and then in the afternoon I'll continue writing and get a few hours, sort of 5 or 6 hours writing. Depends where I'm on, up to in the story, really. I tend to do really long days writing if I'm coming to the end of a story. Yeah, and then, I mean, it can get ridiculous. It can get sort of 14 hours. I have done on a regular basis, but that's the way I work if I want to get it down. If I get writer's block, which is, yeah, it happens, particularly when you don't plot, and I just leave the book and go and write something else, completely different, a different story, and try and then just let that story tick over, really. And eventually, if I get to a block, how can I get over this? Like the desert island with the insect that needed to bite, that was a block, and that was a while, and I kept just leaving it and thinking, how can I overcome this? How can I overcome it? And then started to research when I thought, oh, insect bite, what would that do? And so just stepping back. And when you say inspiration, I would say is easier to come by than confidence. I have huge imposter syndrome. Anybody who knows me well will say the same. I mean, I can't do this. I need to find a proper job, and all the rest of it. It's said 1,000 times, and before publication day, that gets even worse. So luckily, family and friends know to just pat me on the head and go, yeah, we know. And until I sort of come out and go calm again. So,
I love that. I think we have time for one more question, and this one is from Diane on YouTube, and she said, "Do you run or have any training?" I don't know what run means. I don't know if that's a British term, but if Diane, if you can give us a little more information. And I don't believe she means, do you jog? But maybe she does. But I think she's...
Look at me. I can't jog.
But do you have any training in writing, or are you self-taught?
No, I hated school from the day I went till the day I left. It was the happiest day of my life when I left school, and I include that after having 2 children. And it still is the happiest day of my life. I burned my uniform in the back garden and never wanted anything to do with school again. But then I discovered that actually you could study things that you wanted to. So I did history at night school, psychology, and I ended up doing a psychology degree while I worked full time, and I had 2 children under the age of 5 and a husband that worked shifts. It was great fun. It was I think the psychology degree enabled me to be disciplined, and I think that is really important. And for me, I think the writing was always there under the surface. I have got a manuscript that I wrote at 16. It will never see the light of day. But it is funny.
I understand Diane's question now. She was asking if you run or give any training to fellow authors. Do you have any courses or do you train authors at all? I'm sorry, Diane, I misunderstood that question, but I still think it was a really interesting answer. Audrey.
No, no is the short answer. I've mentored a few people who I've met through conferences and stuff, and you know, I'm always happy to talk, as you probably can gather. But I never feel that I know enough, if that makes sense, to be able to put on a course or something. But if anybody, please feel free to, if you've any questions or anything like that, feel free to get in touch with me through Facebook or my website. By all means, you'd be more than welcome.
Yes, and we have reached the end of the time. I do just want to share a comment from Linda. She says, as a fellow Brit from Bognor Regis, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, you have.
She said, it's been lovely to see and hear you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And Phoebe also said, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. So, so really, thank you. Thank you for coming. And if you're watching and you want to discover her books or discover more about Audrey, her website is audreyharrison.co.uk. And if they've never read you before and they're interested in reading one of your books, what would you recommend that they start with?
Oh, the Blue Stockings Quest. It's the first in the I'm still working on the series, but each book is completely different, with I think a unique story about the Regency.
I love that. Blue Stockings Quest. And her covers are beautiful. You'll see when you go on our website and on Amazon. They're really beautiful. I love the cover of that book, especially. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. And again, this event was brought to you by authors.ai. If you have not visited authors.ai, we have a really cool artificial intelligence called Marlowe that is analytical. It can analyze your manuscript and give you helpful feedback, and you can try out Marlowe for free. So you can check out more at authors.ai. So thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you to everyone who joined us live and your fantastic comments and questions. It was so great to chat with you guys, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another First Draft Friday.